Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. AMD's Ryzen 3 CPU launched July 27th, 2017. Today sees the launch of the final two CPUs in the 9 CPU AMD Ryzen lineup. We have the Ryzen 3 1200 and we have the Ryzen 3 1300X. The 1200 retails for $109 and the 1300X retails for $129. Both of these CPUs are 4 cores and 4 threads, roughly equivalent to Intel's current i5 CPUs, but less expensive and, spoiler alert, faster. Now I'm going to be showing you benchmarks later in this video. I will talk about how I tested them. I tested them against a variety of different CPUs, but that will be later. First, I want to talk about who should buy these, who should not buy these, what motherboard you should consider installing it into, should you use the included cooler or should you upgrade it, and generally what I think it fits into the overall picture of the AMD Ryzen lineup. The Ryzen 3 1200 has a base clock speed of 3.1 GHz and a turbo clock speed of 3.4 GHz. The Ryzen 3 1300X has a base clock speed of 3.5 GHz and a turbo of 3.7, but it gets better. The X at the end of the 1300X stands for XFR, or Extended Frequency Range. This is an AMD technology that allows for automatic overclocking. No manual intervention is required by you whatsoever. No BIOS settings, no tuning, no adjustment. It works out of the box. Using the included Wraith Stealth cooler, I can tell you it will go up to 3.9 GHz without a problem automatically. That is an incredible performance boost, not just over the Ryzen 3 1200, but also over the Intel i5 locked CPUs, as I'll show you later in this video. Now your first question may be, should you buy a Ryzen 3 CPU in the first place? I have previously tested the Ryzen 5 CPUs back there and the Ryzen 7 CPUs back there. Links to those videos will be in the video description below if you're interested in seeing them. In the future, I will do an updated comparison of all 9 CPUs in one video and talk about the entire product stack's performance from top to bottom, but that's not this video. This video is focused just on the Ryzen 3 1200 and 1300X. The people who should buy either of these CPUs is somebody looking for a home theater PC, for a casual school, work, or home machine that is primarily going to do watching videos, browsing the web, editing documents, editing images, light video editing, not 4K professional production work, but if you just have some home movies that you film that you want to edit and upload, it absolutely will do that just fine. Do you want to play games? You can absolutely play games on these CPUs, but I don't recommend it for AAA top-of-the-line titles. Do you want to play Battlefield 1? Do you want to play Grand Theft Auto 5? Do you want to play Ghost Recon Wildlands? This really isn't the right CPU for those. You can, but Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 would be a better choice. What can you play on these? World of Warships, World of Tanks, League of Legends, Dota 2, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Rocket League, Overwatch. Those games absolutely play perfectly on the Ryzen 3 and do not play any better on a Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7. They simply don't need the performance of those CPUs. So if you want to play casual or light games, Minecraft, the Lego games, older games, anything that's maybe 3 or 4 years old or older, Ryzen 3 is for you. The next question is, which Ryzen 3 CPU should you buy? We have a 1300X and a 1200. Now there is a $20 price difference between these two processors. My general recommendation is to buy the 1300X. It is $20 more expensive, but it's 500 megahertz faster out of the box. That is a real performance difference, as I'll show you later in this video. It is true that they're both unlocked. Installed on a B350 motherboard, you can overclock both processors. However, in my experience testing both of the CPUs, the 1300X overclocks to a higher total clock speed and does so at lower voltages. I will be showing those results in a future overclocking video. I'm actually overclocked all 9 chips and there's going to be a dedicated video to that. But my advice is if you really want to get a good overclock, the X chips are binned better and will overclock further than the non-X chips across the entire Ryzen lineup. Both Ryzen 3 CPUs come with the excellent AMD Wraith Stealth cooler. This is a 65 watt TDP cooler that's extremely silent. If you have used stock coolers in the past and been unhappy with the noise they make, Don't be this time. Give this a try. You will be pleasantly surprised. It provides all the cooling that either of these Ryzen 3 CPUs need. I do not recommend that you use anything other than the included cooler. It simply isn't worth the money. If you want more cooling or if you want something fancier, buy a faster CPU instead. What would I recommend? The Ryzen 5 1500X. You can see the Wraith Spire cooler that comes with the Ryzen 5 1500X right here, and I put it on the desk for comparison purposes. They both have the same fan, the only difference is in the amount of metal in the heatsink. 95 watt versus 65 watt, but that's an 8-thread CPU. This is a 4-thread CPU, and so for the Ryzen 3s, this really is all that you need. Even overclocked, which I will cover in the overclocking video, this still provides all the cooling you need, even for the 1300X, even when running faster than the out-of-the-box clock speeds. What motherboard should you install your new AMD Ryzen 3 CPU into? A full answer to that question really deserves its own video, but I'll give you the short answer here. There are 3 AMD chipsets to consider: the A320, the B350, and the X370. There are 3 motherboard sizes to consider: ITX, Micro ATX, and full-size ATX that you see here. And then there are many manufacturers to consider. The only thing I'm going to talk about here is chipset. Manufacturers very personal. ASRock, Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, they're all great companies. Choose based upon price and your personal preference as to which company you like the best. There's really no performance difference between any of the companies. The size of the motherboard comes down to the case you're going to install it in, whether you want an ITX or one of the 2 ATX sizes. Instead here, I'm just going to talk about the chipset, A320, B350, or X370. And to do that, I'm going to put some slides up on the screen so you can see all the details in their glory. Here you can see the main feature differences between the A320, the B350, and the X370 chipsets. Now, all of these support USB 3.1 Gen 2 native. They support SATA and PCI Express solid-state drives. But overclocking and then Crossfire and SLI support is where the differences really come into play. You cannot overclock Ryzen processors on an A320 board. You can on a B350 board, and if you plan to upgrade or you simply want to overclock, you will need a B350 board. The main difference with the X370 boards is to allow you to run cards in either AMD's Crossfire or NVIDIA's SLI. It properly splits the X16 PCI Express lanes between the 2 slots. Now, it is true that you can run Crossfire on some B350 boards, but it's not proper support because it doesn't split 50-50. It leaves 16 lanes on the first slot and 4 lanes on the second run through the chipset. It is not an optimal solution. For most people watching this video, an A320 chipset board for $50 to $60 combined with the Ryzen 3 1300X is going to be the deal. This chart shows more detail between the various chipsets. Note the 2 on the bottom, the X370 and the A300. These are small form factor options. Most of these are really going to be found in pre-builts or those little mini computers that you can find from various manufacturers. You may find motherboards based on these at some point, although I have not seen one yet. The top 3 are really the ones you want to look at. Dropping from a B350 to an A320 doesn't actually cost you very much. You lose a single USB port, dropping from 2 to 1, but it's still 13 ports. That's plenty for most people. You have the same NVMe solid-state drive support, the same Serial ATA Express support. You do lose 2 chipset lanes to the actual chipset, but that is very minor. For a Ryzen 3, that's not going to matter. And then, as I said before, you notice that the overclocking is locked on the A320. Now, if you do want to upgrade in the future, if you're thinking, I'll buy a Ryzen 3 today, and then maybe 3 or 4 years from now, I'll buy whatever comes out in the future, then buying a B350 chipset may make sense for future upgradability. You're likely to run a faster CPU in the future, and that makes sense. But if you don't think you're going to upgrade in the next 3 years, if this is the only processor you're going to have for a while, save your money, get the A320. It's plenty with that Ryzen 3 1300X installed. The next question you might have is, which video card should you buy? Hint, hint. The RX 560 makes an excellent choice for Ryzen 3. If you plan to play Overwatch, League of Legends, World of Tanks, World of Warships, Dota 2, Minecraft, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, if you plan to play at 1080p resolution, you don't need anything more than this card. You can certainly, if they're available, buy a RX 570 or 580, but for those kinds of games, you really don't need to spend the money. Sure, they can give you 150 to 200 frames per second, but this will run most of those games at 100 frames per second at some reasonable level of detail at 1080p. There will be future game performance videos I will show you with RX 560, 570, and 580 run on Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 CPUs to show you what that looks like. I don't have those available for you today, but those will be coming up soon. Today, what I wanted to do was remove all of the graphics performance limitations. So what card did I test these on for the launch? GTX 1080 Ti. Now that's a ridiculous card for a Ryzen 3 CPU. No one should do that. But the point is to give the computer all the graphics card performance in the world so that we make it about the CPU and not the GPU. In most of the tests you're going to see here in a few minutes, and I did test 6 different games, the CPU was the performance limiter, not the GPU. Make a note of that when you watch the real-time MSI Afterburner numbers in the GTA 5 videos here in just a minute, at how much the graphics card was sitting around waiting for the CPUs to respond. But no one with any sense is going to install a $700 graphics card on a $120 CPU. That's simply for benchmarking purposes. This is really what you should put on it, or something like it. Before we get to the benchmarks, which are coming in just a minute, I do want to talk about the AM4 platform in general and the improvements which have come since it launched back at the beginning of March 2017. AMD has been very aggressive at working with the various motherboard companies to improve the platform. The BIOS updates which are now available really do make a difference. I'm pleased to announce with the latest BIOS updates that I've gotten on my MSI, my ASUS, and my ASRock motherboards, DDR4-3200 MHz is now working very well across the board, no pun intended. I had 3 different DDR4 memory kits, Corsair, G-Skill, and Gill, all working at DDR4-3200 MHz in my $89 B350 Prime ASUS motherboard, which is what I tested all of these CPUs on. If you were concerned about RAM speed or RAM support in the past, those days are largely gone now. It has improved by leaps and bounds. So I do highly recommend DDR4-3200 MHz RAM. It's only about $10 or $15 more expensive than 2400 or 2666, and it does make a difference in some applications. Furthermore, please make sure that Windows 10 is fully updated. Microsoft has made some updates to the scheduler and some other things within Windows that definitely help. Furthermore, AMD has now updated their chipset drivers and created a balanced power plan profile which is optimized for the Ryzen processors and Ryzen Infinity Fabric. I will link to it down in the video description below. If you are running Windows 10 and an AMD Ryzen processor, please download and install those drivers. Separate from the video drivers, it's chipset drivers which installs AMD's optimized power plan profile, which will improve performance and improve the power efficiency of your system without having to just turn off power saving completely. That brings us to the benchmarks. Now I have 6 different non-gaming benchmarks and 6 different gaming benchmarks to show you today. If, however, you have seen everything you need to and you decide that Ryzen 3 is for you, please remember to use the links in the video description below. They will take you to both Amazon and Newegg for everything discussed in this video. All the Ryzen processors, the A320 and the B350 motherboards, as well as some RAM that I know works at DDR4-3200 MHz on the boards that I tested. Now, with no further ado, let's take a look at some benchmark results. 7-Zip is a file compression decompression utility and it has a built-in benchmark. This demonstrates the multi-threaded performance of each processor. This is used for installing programs, updating programs, decompressing files, compressing files. It's a great free utility to use to save space on your storage medium or for when you need to upload things. Today we are testing 7 different CPUs, the 2 Ryzen 3 CPUs, the 2 Ryzen 5, which are 4-core 8-thread chips, the i3-7100, the i5-7400, and then the Pentium G4560. Higher scores are better. I would like to point out that the Ryzen 3 1300X for $129 is faster than the i5-7400 for $179, and these are all at stock clock speeds. No chip in any of these benchmarks is overclocked in any way. The value for the money that Ryzen 3 1300X provides is tremendous. Now, the Ryzen 3 1200 is $10 less expensive than an i3-7100, and it is still faster. It does cost a bit more than a Pentium G4560, but it's a solid 30% faster as well, worth every penny. I'm not going to talk about the Ryzen 5 chips in detail here. That's going to be a future video. I'm including them for reference so you can see what you get when you step up just a bit above the Ryzen 3 chip and spend a bit more money. The next test we're going to look at is Cinebench R15. This is the multi-threaded CPU benchmark. Again, Ryzen 3 1300X solidly beats the i5 7400 while costing $50 less. The Ryzen 3 1200 again beats the i3 7100 while also costing a bit less and completely trounces the G4560. Value for the money is what we're looking at here. And again, as I said, these are non-overclocked results. The next test may surprise some of you. This is the single-threaded CPU Z benchmark. This is testing one thread, one core only. The fastest processor in this lineup is the Ryzen 3 1300X. That 200 megahertz XFR auto overclock, it is running at 3.9 gigahertz. I did check. Notice that the i3 7100, which also runs at 3.9 gigahertz, is slower than the Ryzen 3. Clock for clock, Ryzen is actually often faster than Intel. The only advantage Intel has on the very high end is clock speed, 5 gigahertz on the i7 versus 4 gigahertz on the Ryzen 7. If the clock speeds were the same, Ryzen's actually faster in many cases. Notice the Ryzen 3 1200 running at 3.4 gigahertz beats the Pentium G4560 running at 3.5 gigahertz. Ryzen is really an amazing CPU. This is the multi-threaded version of the CPU Z benchmark. The Ryzen 3 1300X scores 1,645 points. The i5 7400, also a 4-core 4-thread CPU, scores 1,495. Again, $50 less expensive, and it beats it. When it comes to using 4 threads, the Pentium G4560 and i3 simply can't compete. Please note that both the G4560 and the i3 are 4-thread chips, but they're dual core. And what you're seeing here is the loss of performance from the fact that they actually do not have 4 real cores. This is why the Ryzen 3 1200 is so much faster than the i3 7100, because the Ryzen has 4 real processing cores. It's not hyperthread. Those are 4 genuine cores. The next test we're going to look at is 3D Mark Time Spy. This is a DirectX 12 test, and I did make a note at the top that we are using a GTX 1080 Ti because this test does in fact test the graphics card as much as it does the CPU. However, it is not just a CPU test. We do have a heavy physics-based component here, and so that's why I'm including it. Please note this is the very first test you will see where the i5 beats the Ryzen 3 1300X by a little bit. While it is true that it beats it, it only beats it by 0.9%. It is not even a 1% difference. This is a rounding error, and since the Ryzen 3 is $50 less expensive while being less than 1% slower, I'm still going to call it a victory for the Ryzen 3. That is real value for the money right there. Now, I know I said I wouldn't talk about the Ryzen 5 much, but I would just like to point out that the $159 Ryzen 5 1400, $20 less expensive than the i5, beats it. But there's not a very large difference here. We are, in fact, primarily limited by the graphics performance, not the CPU performance, but I'm including it because some people want to see this. The next test that I want to show you is PC Mark 8 Home Test, OpenGL accelerated on the GTX 1080 Ti. Now, PC Mark 8 is several years old now. They have come out with a newer version, but I don't have it, so we're running PC Mark 8. This test is entirely single-threaded. It does not make use of 4 or 8 threads whatsoever, as you can see from the results here. And it also heavily favors Intel chips because it is several years old. What is the PC Mark 8 home test? Web browsing, document creation, video conferencing like Skype, watching videos, that sort of thing. It's not testing games, it's not testing content creation, it's not testing multimedia applications other than watching a video, which really doesn't take any CPU power. The difference in performance percentage-wise between the highest and lowest number here is less than 10%. In fact, the difference between the i5 7400 and the Ryzen 3 1300X is 3.7%. It's a very small difference. Now we're going to look at the built-in benchmark for Grand Theft Auto 5 on 6 of these 7 processors. The Pentium G4560 is not included, but the i3 7100 and the i5 7400 are. You can see them on the bottom. The Ryzen 3 processors, which we're testing today, are on the top, and then Ryzen 5 for reference are in the middle. This game is completely CPU bound. Notice the graphics card is not at 100% in any of these runs. We are totally limited by the CPUs. Further Further, please remember that the Ryzen 5 chips are 8-thread CPUs and all the others are 4-thread. That is why the CPU usage percentage is much lower on the Ryzen 5s. The RAM is the same between each of the machines, although the speed is different because the Intel chips are at DDR4-3200. They have to be because these are locked processors. Now, I would like to remind you, if you're a regular viewer of my videos, that the built-in benchmark does not always represent the actual performance of the game. In games like Grand Theft Auto 5, CPU usage in the built-in benchmark is lower than actually driving around in the real world. I've done enough actual live gameplay videos to be able to tell you that with 100% confidence. But this is something quick, simple, and easy to show in a launch video for processors. There will be live game performance videos on these different processors in future videos, but this video would be 2 hours long if I showed them all to you here. Instead, I'm going to show you the benchmarks. But the benchmarks that I'm going to show you in the other 5 games, I did record, and those recordings will be shown in future videos for comparison. The performance you are watching here is 1440p resolution, very high detail preset, full screen anti-aliasing turned on. All of these videos were recorded with NVIDIA's Shadowplay, but that doesn't make much of a performance difference when you're operating a 1080 Ti graphics card because it has performance to spare. Now, some people may question, why are we playing at 1440p? Aren't these entry-level processors? Well, they are, but that's the frame rate concern, not the graphics resolution or graphics detail concern. Give it enough graphics performance, and even a Ryzen 3 1200 will play Grand Theft Auto 5 at 1440p without any issue. Do you want to play League of Legends or World of Tanks at 4K resolution? Rest assured, these processors can do it just fine. You don't need an i7 or a Ryzen 7 to play games at 1440p or 4K if you have enough graphics performance and you're not playing AAA games. Now, I am going to show you the results for Ghost Recon Wildlands, The Division, etc. here in a minute, but I'll also show you Overwatch World of Tanks as well. But before we get to that, what you've been watching is just the MSI Afterburner real-time numbers. I now want to show you the full screen benchmark run on just the Ryzen 3 1200 and Ryzen 3 1300X. Since we're reviewing these two processors, I thought I would go ahead and repeat these, but just put the full screen run in so you can actually see the detail and everything that's going on. Frankly, this game is absolutely beautiful, and we are running over 90 frames per second at times. It dips below that a bit, but we're well over 60, that's for sure. What you are watching right now is 1440p, very high detail, full screen anti-aliasing turned on, and we are on a $109 processor. This is epic performance for the money, but it's going to get better in just a minute with the 1300X. Now, as I said before, nobody seriously is going to put a $700 graphics card on a $100 CPU. That doesn't make any sense, and I don't recommend it. But the reason I did it is it removed all graphics limitation from performance. Look at the first line of the MSI Afterburner numbers. Our 1080 Ti is currently running around 58, 59%, there's 66%, so there's graphics performance to spare. This game wouldn't run any faster at 1440p because the graphics card is not our limitation, the CPU is. Now you might say, wait a minute, the CPU is not at 100%. That's true, this is the game's built-in benchmark. I've played the game on these CPUs, rest assured it sits at 100% almost all of the time. Now, this is a 1.5-year old game. Some of the newer games, like Ghost Recon Wildlands, are going to peg that CPU to 100% all of the time because they really want more than 4 threads. This game is sort of the last of the generation that really plays well on 4-thread CPUs. The newer games that have come out in the past year or 6 months, such as Battlefield 1, The Division, Ghost Recon Wildlands, Mass Effect Andromeda, really do use more than 4 cores, and it is time to move beyond that for AAA gaming. This is why I gave that big long speech at the beginning, which said if you want to play casual games, esports games, League of Legends, Overwatch, Dota 2, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Ryzen 3 is all you need. You don't need to spend 1 penny more on a Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7 CPU. But if you want to play Ghost Recon Wildlands, yes you do. For anyone curious, the specific 1080 Ti card that we're using in this machine is the MSI Duke. The Duke is a nice triple fan black and white card from MSI. It is factory overclocked. I have not overclocked it further. This is stock speeds out of the box. We are currently over 1900 megahertz. I've previously done an unboxing and overview of that card. It's a great card for a very reasonable price. It's $50 less expensive than some of the other factory overclocked 1080 Ti cards, and I do recommend it. Look at that, it's only running at about 64, 65 degrees Celsius. Very cool card. We are now looking at the Ryzen 3 1300X benchmark. Again, all the same settings, same card, everything. All I've done is change out the CPU. Again, please note this is all stock clock speeds. Nothing has been overclocked in anything you'll see in this video. Now the 1300X has a turbo clock speed out of the box of 3.7 and an XFR auto overclocking speed of up to 3.9 gigahertz. But it's not going to do that on all 4 cores, not without manually overclocking it. In my tests, the Ryzen 3 1200 generally tends to run about 3.2 gigahertz on all 4 cores, and the 1300X tends to run about 3.6 gigahertz on all 4 cores. It does jump up into the 3.7, 3.8 range occasionally, but when you're playing games like this where your CPU usage is over 50%, you're into that 3 and 4 core usage, you're generally going to see between 3.2 on the 1200 and 3.6 on the 1300X. Now, how much does that translate to real-world frame rate performance improvements in games such as this? Well, I'll show you the chart in just a minute with all 6 CPUs. But in short, it's a relatively minor difference, all things considered, but it's also a minor price difference. We're talking about $20 more, and that is really not a lot of money if you're already buying a motherboard, a CPU, RAM, a case, power supply, etc. I highly recommend the 1300X. Now earlier I said I was going to discuss overclocking in another video, and I will, and I'll show you the overclock tests of all 9 Ryzen CPUs in another video. But for the purposes of what we're looking at today, I didn't have any problem running the Ryzen 3 1300X on the included cooler at 3.8 gigahertz. I did have to bump up the stock voltage by just a little bit, but it wasn't much at all. The Ryzen 3 1200 did not want to run at 3.8 gigahertz. It ran at 3.6 just fine, but even if I gave it a ton of voltage, it did not want to run at 3.8. Please note, I have a sample size of 1. I have one 1300X and one 1200. Your mileage may vary. Please note any conversation of overclocking, and I will give a big disclaimer in the overclocking video, but any discussion of overclocking needs to put this point in. Everyone's results are going to vary. You may get a little more or a little less than I got. There certainly will be people who struggle to get 3.8 on all 4 cores on a 1300X. Not many, but there will be a few. And then there will be people who get 3.8 on a 1200. Your mileage may vary. But if you are interested in overclocking, I believe you're going to have a better chance of it if you go with a 1300X. All right, let's take a look at the benchmarks. GTA 5, very high detail, FXAA on, 1440p, on the GTX 1080 Ti. You can see all the numbers here. The green bars are the average performance, the red bars are the 1% minimum, and the blue bars are the 0.1% minimum. Let me explain that for a minute. The 1% minimum means that 99% of the time, that's the lowest frame rate you'll get. It's not the lowest ever, but it's the lowest frame rate you'll get 99% of the time. I consider the red bars to be the playable number. That's where it's going to drop in normal playtime. The blue bar takes it 1 decimal place further to 99.9% of the time. It's much closer to a true minimum. My advice is look at the red bars. Don't worry about the blue as much. But in terms of average performance, that's going to be the green bars. Notice that all of these CPUs are between 90 and 110 frames per second, with the best being the Ryzen 5 1500X. The additional threads help because occasionally even GTA 5 will go over 4 threads, and it does make a difference, but not a big one in this older game. In terms of average performance, you can see that the Ryzen 3 1300X is at 98 frames per second. The i5 7400 is at 106. Yes, it's faster, but GTA 5 is well known to like Intel processors. It's very well optimized for them. Is it worth an extra $50 to get that performance difference? Maybe, but if you're okay to spend $50 more, buy a Ryzen 5 1500X for $60 more and get even better performance with 8 threads. To be completely honest, now that the Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 processors are out, the i3 and i5 really make no sense as they stand. I hope when the next generation of Intel chips come out, they change that to maybe 4 cores on the i3 and 6 cores on the i5. That will make it interesting. We'll just have to wait and see. Next up, we have the Division Ultra Detail 1440p. Notice something here, all the frame rates are awfully close to each other. Now, I will admit here that this was somewhat graphics card limited. I probably should have turned it down to very high detail, but I was halfway through the testing and simply didn't have time to finish it. When I revisit these, I'll go back and sample it and see how it runs with the detail turned down just a bit. But I did review the game footage, which I do have and I'll show you in a future video. But in general, this is mostly a graphics card limited test, so I won't dwell on it too much. Moving on to Ghost Recon Wildlands, very high detail, full screen anti-aliasing turned on, 1440p. We are not graphics card limited here. I did double check. The graphics card is not pegged at 99% in these tests. What you're looking at here is actual performance difference at 1440p between these various CPUs. What you have here is what appears to be very playable performance between these 6 CPUs. Let me tell you, it's not as good as the chart makes it look. The Ryzen 5 1400 and Ryzen 5 1500X are the only really good CPUs here. For however good the frame rate performance may look, the input lag on both the i3, i5 chips as well as the 2 Ryzen 3 chips is dreadful. I'll talk about this more when I actually put the gameplay footage into a video, but let me tell you, these charts are deceptive. This game stutters and lags badly on 4-thread CPUs. I really would not want to play this on anything less than a Ryzen 5. The 8 threads really do make a difference, and frankly, a Ryzen 5 1600 would be my main recommendation. The extra 2 real cores make a difference in Ghost Recon Wildlands. As I've said before in this video, the Ryzen 3 chips really aren't meant for AAA games. They'll do it, but they're not optimal for it. That's what Ryzen 5 is for, and preferably Ryzen 5 1500X or Ryzen 5 1600. But it will do it if you're tolerant of input lag, especially in this game. It does GTA 5 much better in the open world portions of the game. Moving on from AAA games, Overwatch, ultra detail, full screen anti-aliasing on, 2160p, otherwise known as 4K. I discovered something fascinating. Who would think that a GTX 1080 Ti would be performance limited in Overwatch, which is not an overly graphically demanding game? A GTX 1050 will play this game just fine at over 60 frames per second at 1080p. But believe it or not, at 4K, we are still largely graphics card limited here. Now let me just say at this point in the video, RX Vega is coming very soon. When it does, the very first thing I'm going to do with it is put it in all 9 of the Ryzen CPUs, Ryzen 3, 5, and 7. I'm going to turn the resolution down to 1080p, and I'm going to retest these 6 games on RX Vega when it comes out. I would have retested Overwatch here at 1440p if I had time. Unfortunately, I ran out of time before this video had to be done, and so this is what I have available for July 27th, launch day for Ryzen 3. Not to worry, we will be taking another look at these CPUs. In fact, several more looks with the overclocking video. We'll be doing builds with Ryzen 3. I'll be putting RX Vega into it. And then I will also be doing the RX 560, 570 versus 580 in both Ryzen 3 and Ryzen 5 as well. 2 more quick results. World of Tanks, also at 4K. Also, I was completely blown away by how demanding this really was at 4K. Who would have thought a 6-year-old online free-to-play tank game would crush a 1080 Ti at 4K? If you've watched my Which 1080 Ti Should You Buy video, for example, I talked about the fact that if you want to play games at 4K, full stop, you need a 1080 Ti. There's nothing else to discuss. And many people are like, oh man, but you can play games with less. Yes, you can. At high detail, instead of max, at 4K, you'll get 60 frames per second out of a 1070 or 1080, but that's even then making a compromise on detail settings. So really, 4K probably was not the best choice for this or the next game to come. As I said, as soon as I get RX Vega, I'm going to retest all of these CPUs at 1080p along with the RX 560, 570, and 580 cards. The last game I'm going to show you is World of Warships. Now this is a bit of an interesting situation. Sometimes it's CPU limited here, sometimes it's GPU limited. After recording the voiceover for World of Tanks just a second ago, I paused the recording and I went and I looked at these actual videos. That's why it's so important that I have the gameplay these were based on actually recorded. There were times across all these CPUs that we were in fact CPU limited and not GPU limited, but it's all over the place. World of Warships is tough to benchmark because the runs are not consistent. As an example, on the Ryzen 5 1500X, I recorded 4 separate battles. We had a low of 84 frames per second and a high of 91 frames per second. Likewise, the minimums were all over the place as well. It's very inconsistent. Now, when I do a World of Warships video comparing these, I may actually show multiple results or show you perhaps a range because it's never consistent from battle to battle. The map, how much combat, how many ships are on fire, it all affects the performance. So just consider what you're seeing here to be a ballpark figure. I averaged multiple runs together to come up with the numbers you're seeing. Every one of these chips will be faster or slower than this depending upon any given battle that you might be fighting. And so there you have a very complete overview with 12 different benchmarks between the Ryzen 3, Ryzen 5, and some Intel CPUs. All of these CPUs are now available today. As I said before, links down in the video description below to both Amazon and Newegg for everything discussed in this video. Please use those links when you're shopping. I would really appreciate it. It does make a difference. Like this video if you like it. Share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big, huge red button directly below. Questions and comments in the comment section. And as I said before, everything down in the video description really does make a difference. Please check it out. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.